If I had a nickel for every time there was some really bizarre, controversial overlap between Booktok and the Seattle Kraken hockey team, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but weird that it's happened twice. A few years ago, a TikToker named Kiara Lewis made a pivot from whatever her typical content was to making Booktok content. I don't know how many followers she had before joining Booktok, but I know that she pretty quickly gained 1 million followers. People found her reviews and her sense of humor and her reading reactions and overall personality pretty humorous and entertaining. She falls into that category of content creator that's really loud and boisterous and really dramatic with all of her emotions and reactions to everything, which is fun for a lot of people. There's a reason why she has 1 million followers. There's a reason why a lot of personalities like that thrive on YouTube and TikTok. With her gaining such a large following from the Booktok space so quickly, though, she started calling herself the queen of Booktok, which was rubbing people the wrong way. Lewis, at some point in 2023, read the book Pucking Around by Emily Rath, which is a hockey romance. Why choose? I think it's one woman falling in love with 3 hockey players. Kiara Lewis then started posting pictures of real life professional hockey players that she thought were cute as like her fan casts for the fictional hockey players that she was reading about, and got really fixated on the Seattle hockey team, the Kraken, which up until yesterday I referred to as the Krakens because I have never heard of any sports team identifying as one singular entity instead of a team of creatures or animals of some kind. And things were really buzzing with this overlap between Booktok and hockey. It wasn't the first time there was overlap, but it seemed to be the most significant and the most viral. There were plenty of viral moments with college hockey players posting their strappy videos after being fan cast in their comment section regarding like The Deal by El Kendi, and it always fizzled out in a really weird way every single time. So this wasn't the first time there was major overlap between Booktok and hockey players, but this was sort of like the biggest as it spilled over into the NHL and was acknowledged by the hockey team. The official TikTok for the Kraken started showing up in Kiara Lewis's comment sections. They were following each other. They seemed to be really encouraging of Kiara and a lot of people's posts lusting after the hockey players. The official TikTok account even made a mention of Booktok in their bio temporarily. Then the Kraken invited Kiara to come to one of their games. They gave her a jersey that said Booktok on it, and she had 2 signs, one saying to crack her back and the other that was a poem about one player in particular named Vince, telling him to break her back, break her back. Videos from that game, she was very high energy, she was excited, she was very happy to be there. She was making lots of her typical comments about the players right there next to them, like in person, mainly while they were doing their stretches before the game. Then things started to explode when a wife of one of the hockey players took to social media to talk about her discomfort with a lot of the sexual harassment that her husband and the other players were experiencing. The main Kraken hockey player that this was involving was Alex Wenberg and his wife, who made the social media post. There's a couple of Instagram stories talking about how some of the comments were like funny at first, and she was making jokes about how her husband was like the hot topic on Booktok at the moment, but that commenters and participants on Booktok had been starting to cross a serious line. Quote, "For someone who wrote my final dissertation on sexual consent and what's crossing a line, this has been especially interesting because there seemed to be a different threshold of what is considered okay only because the victims of people's desires are male hockey players. I don't like that double standard. I feel that women who have experienced catcalling, getting involuntarily filmed in exposed situations like a groin stretch at their job, should hold ourselves to a higher standard. You can be sex positive without exploiting others." She said that there is a difference between crushing on someone, or her exact language was fancying someone, and being predatory and exploitative, with a follow-up post being not necessarily directed at Kiara Lewis, but referencing Kiara Lewis in particular as like someone in the lineup, involving a screenshot from her comment section where her name is just barely in it, and a direct reference to the crack my back sign at her husband's game. And everything, it absolutely exploded. Booktok was sort of split in two of people who were angry with Kiara Lewis and with this large collective of women on social media that have been harassing these players versus the other half that were angry with Felicia for making these posts, calling her a hypocrite, saying that she's like targeting and bullying and demonizing Kiara. Alex Winberg made his own post addressing all of this, talking about how he's been silent for too long about it, how it wasn't fair that his wife was the only one speaking up about an issue that directly affected him as well. He said, "I'm all for the Booktok community." He said, "We can all take a joke and funny comments, but when it turns personal and into something bigger that affects our family, we need to tell you that we have had enough. Enough of sexual harassment and harassment of our character and our relationship." Kiara Lewis was going on TikTok live streams, sobbing and hyperventilating, yelling about how all of this was so unfair, that she was being targeted for this solely, calling Alex Winberg a bitch, and also heavily implying and flat out saying that the only reason why Alex Winberg and his wife could possibly have an issue with women flocking to his DMs and leaving these comments is if he is actually someone who would cheat on his wife, completely disregarding that he is allowed to not like unwanted sexual comments, that they've both just stated that it was funny at first, but then got really intense really quickly and very uncomfortable, that this is catcalling and sexual harassment. I remember watching some of these live streams, like where I was watching Kiara Lewis say these things, saying that unless Alex Winberg is giving Felicia something to be concerned about, that they shouldn't have an issue with it, which was very strange and makes literally zero sense. But Kiara and also a lot of these commenters were calling Felicia hypocritical for making her own posts sexualizing her husband, to which Felicia needed to inform these people that she is allowed to make consensual sexual comments about her husband because she knows her husband and she has permission from her husband. She literally had to explain consent, and people were still very upset with her. A lot of the anger against her seems to be rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of what consent is and why it's important to have. What was also so strange is that another point of contention for Kiara against Felicia was that Felicia was referencing things that had happened 4 months ago, and you're only bringing it up now, that this is like old news. I really don't think that was relevant at all, or that 4 months would have made a difference. 4 months isn't even a large gap of time, but yeah, sure, whatever. Then the other big issue that Kiara Lewis had was that Felicia had made this public statement without speaking to Kiara directly. Kiara seemed really insistent that this entire thing, that like all of these posts that Felicia was posting were about her in particular, that they were posts against Kiara, when they were posts to the general public about behavior from a large community of people, where examples referencing Kiara were used. I also don't think Felicia would have been obligated to reach out directly to the woman who was sexually harassing her husband, because Kiara's talking about how if Felicia had just DM'd her privately, she would have taken down the videos. But like, an argument could be made that Kiara should have reached out to him or the wife to double check that what she was doing was okay. Because Kiara said that once she found out that Alex Winberg was married, that she was cooling down like off of the comments she was making about him. So she understood kind of a boundary thing there, and understood that what she was doing was in some way disrespectful to his wife. But then she was confused on why his wife felt disrespected, which was very strange. Like there were multiple arguments happening from Kiara all at the same time that were starting to clash and not really make sense together. But above all, Kiara was also very upset that the Kraken fully unfollowed her and started deleting their videos and their many posts featuring like thirst traps and fan cam edits of the players, which I do think is really shady of the Kraken social media team. Kiara Lewis is a grown woman who is responsible for her own actions, but the social media team running everything for the Kraken also actively encouraged this behavior from Kiara and from fans, and helped facilitate these interactions. And when shit hit the fan, the Kraken social media team just like attempted to scrub everything and cut ties immediately and pretend like this didn't happen, which was very spineless and something that always bothered me in this entire controversy. One of the really funny things that was happening sort of towards the tail end of this moment for Kiara was in one of her many rants. She was talking about how it was so unfair. Oh, because that was the other thing. ESPN wrote an article about this. This had totally broken Booktok containment and entered mainstream ESPN. And I can't remember if this particular rant happened before or after the ESPN article. At some point, Kiara Lewis was crediting herself as like reviving hockey. She talked about how like she boosted its popularity, how it was like dying, and she's the reason why hockey gained thousands of new fans that they so desperately need, which then got a pretty big reaction from pre-Booktok hockey fans who were like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it also did not help that so many of Kiara's followers were like, it's true, I never watched hockey until Kiara watched hockey. And it was weird. But at some point, Kiara Lewis like deleted some of her videos, and she decided that she was just never going to talk about this again or address any of it. I think one of her final posts about it was her talking about how Jesus had her back or something. And then the very next day she started posting like nothing had ever happened. Like she was never in distress. Like she wasn't just sobbing uncontrollably to the point of like hyperventilating and screaming in her bathroom for the past few days. And that was 2023. A few days ago, here in 2025, a different incident on a much smaller scale, also involving Booktok, also involving the Seattle Kraken hockey team, also related to romance novels and conversations surrounding boundaries and consent, but in a different way. There is an ice level reporter for the Seattle Kraken named Piper Shaw. An ice level reporter, for anyone who doesn't know, because I didn't know until I Googled it, because I don't know anything about hockey beyond the fact that it is a thing that people do, and also you lose your teeth, and also the players get put in a timeout box, and I think that's really funny. Apparently, in the NHL, all 32 teams have their own broadcast and broadcasting team. They have their own commentators that talk about the play-by-plays. It's a whole thing, which I think is really interesting because I've never heard of that for anything. I say that like I watch sports. I don't. But on these broadcast teams, there are ice level reporters, which are reporters who are reporting about stuff like rinkside, updating the audience on injuries, staff developments. They conduct interviews, they're at the press conferences, they perform like news segment stories for the broadcast in order to build a better connection and understanding between the audience and the players. There's typically just one ice level reporter for every single broadcast, or at least one primary one, because when I was looking up the ice level reporters for all 32 teams, a good chunk of them just have like one person listed, and then another chunk has multiple names listed for the ice level reporters because there's a primary reporter and then there's a reporter that only works for select games, and then there are a sprinkling of broadcasts that have only a list of reporters that do select games. So like I guess they have a set rotation with no primary. Piper Shaw is the primary ice level reporter for the Seattle Kraken, and she posted this TikTok a few days ago talking about how there is like a fan fiction published about her falling in love with a goalie called Power Play by Chelsea Curdo.
Yes, I have been aware of this hockey romance novel about me for many, many months now. I obviously have a management team and lawyers because I am a professional broadcaster. I've been made aware of what my options are, and I have many thoughts about this.
It's book 2 in the DC Stars series, which is Chelsea Curdo's series about hockey romances. And the series was first published last year in 2024. And a character that was introduced in book 1 gets her own romance in book 2, which is Power Play. And that character is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pretty ice level reporter named Piper. And yeah, she does look similar to the girl on the cover and is really upset from multiple perspectives, with the first one being that she feels that her likeness has been used for a romance novel without her knowledge or permission. In Power Play, it's about an ice level reporter who falls in love with her assigned team's goalie, and they get like drunk married in Vegas and then stay married and then fall in love. So Piper Shaw feels very confident that this is her, or at least very heavily inspired by her. Not because she's ever had relations with her goalie. She's married to not a hockey player, but in all the other stuff. She's also upset with the argument that this is purely coincidental on Chelsea Curdo's part, because Piper says that this would mean that one of two things happened. Number one, Chelsea Curto did not research the world of ice level reporters very well or at all, which offended her, Piper, as a journalist.
There's only 32 teams in the National Hockey League. There's only 32 team reporters in the National Hockey League. Not all of us are women. And there is only one named Piper. And it's a pretty unique name. So either the author did not do her due diligence and just like a basic fact check of 32 teams. And, you know, like, that's okay. If you didn't do that, then you're just like insanely lazy for like an author. Like, I can't, like, I'm a journalist. Like, what? Why would you not do that?
Or, according to Piper, Chelsea Curto did do the research and did see that the Kraken had an ice level reporter that looked like Piper Shaw and was also named Piper, and didn't care that there would be a noticeable similarity between the two.
That's crazy. Or she did, and it was a choice, which is even worse.
And there is an issue on Piper's end with there being similarities between the two, because she takes issue with romance novels like this in general. Piper Shaw talks about how she supports women and supports women's creativity and doesn't have an issue with being a writer, or I guess even being a romance writer. But Piper Shaw takes issue with books like this in particular about women professionals in the hockey field having relationships with the players that she's supposed to be professional with, because it's already hard enough being a woman in the industry. Okay, editing Grapey here, because I didn't fully explain this very well or at all, really, but there was a lot of discourse responding to Piper Shaw's initial video because they thought that she had said that she takes issue with hockey romances because hockey romances are reductive and bad for women, when she said that she didn't have an issue with hockey romances, that she's fine with hockey romances, she just personally doesn't read them, but also that she takes issue with hockey romances that feature women professionals in hockey getting into relationships with hockey players. And this was a whole thing to the point of Piper Shaw posting a follow-up video just a moment ago, not only clarifying this point, but also going over details of like a conversation she had with Chelsea Curto. And my 2 cents on that is that I can understand both sides of this particular argument about whether or not romances about professional women in male-dominated spaces getting into relationships with men in those spaces reflecting poorly on the real life women in these spaces and like reinforcing stereotypes and beliefs about what the women are doing in these spaces. I can understand that and why that's such a sensitive topic for Piper Shaw. I personally don't really see an issue with it because the majority of career paths are male dominated and workplace romance is extremely common, both in real life but also as a genre for books. I think as long as the actual book handles these relationship dynamics well and with respect, and also bonus points for acknowledging how common it is for stereotypes to be attached to women in these workplaces, I think I've never had an issue with it. I don't really agree with Piper's comment about how like she doesn't understand how someone who claims to respect the women of hockey can enjoy or support these books, but I do understand what her gripe is. Things are pretty split. There are like polar opposite reactions depending on who you first saw talk about it, like whose side you're leaning on. People who are on Chelsea Curto's side talk about how self-centered and ego-centered and vain Piper Shaw must be to think that this is all about her. People were asking her, they were like, are you fucking the goalie? Is that why you think this is about you? Which was strange, saying that unless she married a goalie that she has no reason to think that it's about her. They talk about how Piper is not that niche or like uncommon of a name like she's claiming, because she did kind of claim that. She said that it's not really a common name. And then there are the other people that are on Piper Shaw's side talking about how this is so gross of Chelsea Curto to do, because let's be honest, like there is a major trend in publishing in general of publishing fan fiction, but also like lots of fan fictions that are being published about real life people that are absolutely done without consent. And like I think this ties into this one argument that I don't think is actually relevant or like doesn't work, because a lot of people on Chelsea Curto's side keep bringing up like the disclaimer page that's like, it's like at the beginning of every book where it's like any similarities to any real life persons, places, or things are purely coincidental as this is a work of fiction, like that disclaimer at the beginning of every book. But like all of the published fan fictions that we know are fan fictions also have that disclaimer. Like, if we know that that documentation is going to be on books of confirmed published fan fiction, I don't know why it would be the argument to use for this, because it's 1 a.m. I don't know if this makes sense, but the conversations truly just kept going back and forth in Piper Shaw's comment section. And then I scrolled down long enough to find Chelsea Curto leaving a comment on that video asking Piper Shaw to open her Instagram DM so they can have a private conversation. And I don't really know what was said in that conversation, but Piper Shaw confirms that a conversation was had in a different reply to a different commenter in that comment section. Okay, final update from Editing Grapey. Can you see how it takes me a couple days to edit? Ooh. Piper Shaw deleted the initial video making the accusations, but left up the follow-up video addressing and clarifying her points. And Chelsea Curto has also posted a multi-paragraph response to all of this on Threads. Piper Shaw's video will be linked below, and these are all of the screenshots from Chelsea Curto's official situation, like on Threads. As it stands now, the women are establishing that they are no longer in conflict and have come to the agreement that Chelsea Curto did not intentionally base her character off of Piper Shaw. Piper Shaw recognizes this, but the two also agree that Chelsea Curto left this book under research, and they apparently had an open conversation about where both women stand on stories like this. What I will say is interesting is that from the perspective of people that are still upset with Piper Shaw, there's a large number of people that insist that she's still like very self-centered and think that she was claiming to be the only blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman in the world, which I think is so interesting. I understand that like even the initial point of what she said is still pretty flimsy. I think it's very bizarre when people intentionally make the argument flimsier. And I feel like if you have a problem with Piper Shaw and her entire argument, you should be able to have an issue with the things that she actually said instead of exaggerating things or just lying in order to make a point. I think that's really disingenuous and odd. I don't like that tactic. She never said the character was her because she's blonde with blue eyes. She said the character was her because she's blonde with blue eyes and is named Piper and is an ice level reporter in the NHL. And also because a lot of people reached out to her saying they thought it was about her. If you have an issue with that argument, then say you have an issue with that listed argument. I think the people are like, she's not the only blonde one. I think that's so dumb and you know it. I am confused on why it took this long for there to be a private conversation between the two. I think it is pretty ironic that Piper Shaw talked about, you know, integrity as a journalist, but then also didn't think to go to the source in making sure that this was like true or anything. Because if she had just done that, none of this would have happened. But yeah, that seems to be the end of that. And I cannot get over the Kraken being at the scene of the crime again. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know.